Okay, so here's a task to try and get you to practice this with some smaller parts of text here. We've got 4 different examples of quote dumps here. The poem opens by describing drought, and then the quote, "The skin cracks like a pod." The poet uses unorthodox syntax to emphasize the drought. There never is enough water. Darker uses sibilants at the start of the second stanza to emphasize the flow of water, sometimes the sudden rush of fortune. Darker uses a metaphor to underline the value of water to the villagers. Silver crashes to the ground. Now, what you're trying to do here is, in each of these quotations, before you move on to trying to change the grammar, pick out the loaded phrases, the loaded single words in each of the quote that are responsible either for, in this case, creating this particular image, like a pod, or the unorthodox syntax. Which 2 words in this particular sentence are the ones that are shifted in order to create the meaning? The sibilants. Where's the sibilants in this particular line from the poem? Use only the words with the sibilants in at this point, so you're just picking out the words that contain sibilants. 4th one, a metaphor to underline the value of water to the villagers. Where's the important single word in this that talks about the value of water? So you're trying to, in each of those cases, first of all, pick out the loaded individual words from within these quotations. So pause the video here, see if you can do that. Okay, so if we're looking at the first sentence, the poem opens by describing a drought. The skin is a loaded phrase because it's metaphorical. The word cracks is telling us an awful lot of meaning about the state of drought, and then a pod itself is the final part of that simile. So it is, of course, an important loaded word. That sentence itself follows the structure. The skin, verb, cracks like a pod, object of the sentence. The second one, there never is the single part of that quotation that you need to identify. There never is enough water. And then water is the only other word that may be useful to you there. In the third example, the word sometimes is an important one here, but it's an adverb. So it does not exactly follow this grammatical pattern that we've been talking about of subject, verb, object components of sentences. Sometimes the sudden rush of fortune is an incomplete sentence, and because it's missing an object, so you've got a verb phrase that opens it. Sometimes the sudden rush, and then of fortune is only the object noun of that particular sentence. It doesn't fully make sense on its own, but the sometimes is an important word. Sudden rush is an important phrase. Of fortune is an important phrase. Then the metaphor. Dark uses a metaphor to underline the value of water to the villagers. Silver, obviously, is an important word here because it is the thing that suggests value. And then crashes is a loaded, dramatic word. And then to the ground, again, is an important part of this. But you can see, again, within these quotations, where are the grammatical elements in the quotations? What's the sentence going to have to look like beforehand to incorporate these embedded quotations? So what you're trying to do is to, from this particular point in time, shift forward and incorporate these quotations into sentences of your own. So if you look on the resource, there is a space for you to try and write sentences that incorporate these quotations into analysis. Pause it here before going on to the next part. Okay, so in this case, here's some examples of sentences that incorporate the quotations using this grammatical pattern. The poem, subject of the sentence, opens by describing how the skin, another subject, cracks like a pod in order to emphasize the intensity of the drought. So we've got, again, that grammatical pattern. Subject, verb, noun, verb, noun. It has to follow in that particular way. Something must be doing something to someone else. And we'll see this in the second line. The poet uses unorthodox syntax as another noun to emphasize the fact that there never is enough water. Darker, object of the sentence, uses sibilants at the start of the second stanza to emphasize how sometimes, as an adverb, there is a sudden rush in the flow of water. Darker is the subject noun, uses a metaphor, another subject noun, to describe the water as silver which crashes to the ground, in order to underline the value of water to the villagers. This is the only complex one here where we have this could be purple as the object of this potential of this sentence, the value of water to the villagers. So each of these sentences makes use of the various components around the quotation. So you're looking again at these quotations. Are they nouns, verbs, or subject nouns, verbs, or object nouns? That's what you're trying to work out. Now, final task. You've got to write an analysis of the 2 lines below using embedded quotes. So, first phase in this, pick out the loaded words, phrases, or parts relevant to techniques in this single quotation. That is the first thing you need to do. You can't work out how to embed them without working out what the important words or phrases are here. Naked children is a loaded phrase. Screaming on its own is a loaded phrase. Liquid sun is another loaded phrase. Those are the examples that you want to be looking at. Then, when you've got those words, identify are they verb phrases or noun phrases. Then, begin your analysis with a positive assertion about the writer, the poet, or Darker's style. The way that the poet describes Darker's use of this technique suggests. The fact that the poet suggests that. Those are all helpful orienter phrases that will allow you to try and build a piece of embedded analysis sentence by sentence. So think of this one sentence at a time. Every single loaded phrase needs a new sentence with that full pattern. Subject, verb, phrase, object, noun phrase.